Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started on this next session. Welcome again. I know for those of us traveling here may have had some challenges. I was one of those lucky folks that got to go through Chicago yesterday.
Oh, that's terrible.
And ironically, the worst part about it was not necessarily the hours of delay, which did occur, but once we got on the plane and we were getting ready to go, never seen this before. It was a brand new plane. The door would not shut on the plane. So they made us get off the plane, but while they were getting off the plane, I swear this happened, the pilots locked themselves out of the cockpit. And they needed to consult the manual on how to override the system and get them back in. So somehow I managed to get here. For those of you who have other travel stories, we can go over those later. And then Jeremy, I want to be reminded to let you know that later on today, we'll be having our annual BTOP Survivor Group Therapy Happy Hour after the Google Happy Hour. So look for that information coming up. Mitzi, right? Ted's here. I know we've got a few in there. We can have a good group. So for this session, it's a little bit different than in what your printed program says. For those of you who have the app, the NATOA app downloaded to your phone, that has the most up-to-date information. And if you need instructions on how to do that, Tanya and Steve and Jen would be happy to tell you how to download the app. But we had a few cancellations, and so we were very lucky that we have such great panelists that agreed to fill in last minute, and we changed the focus slightly of the panel. So really the session is about maximizing your network, best practices for planning, pricing, marketing, and leasing your fiber. And then once Doug and Joanne go through their presentations, Hunter will actually be able to share with us a case study for mobile apps to kind of give you a sense of the types of things that you can do with your network and some of the interesting creative ideas for ways to make it more robust and marketable at the same time. So with that, I'd like to first turn this over to Joanne Hovis, who really needs no introduction, but I will give her one anyway. She's the past president of NATOA. She's the president of CTC Technology and Energy. She is the CEO of CLIck, which is the Coalition for Local Internet Choice. And if you don't know what CLIck is, Joanne would happily answer any questions you have on that. So Joanne?
How about now? Okay. All right. I'm too short to stand behind a podium. Thanks, Lori. And thank you for that introduction. And with respect to CLIck, we'll have a booth outside, and I hope you'll all stop by. But CLIck is a coalition of public and private interests working to ensure that local communities, rather than distant interests, are empowered to make decisions about broadband and how to engage the broadband market and broadband construction. And we are advocating in Washington and at the state level to make sure that localities are freed from prohibitions and barriers that are frankly just designed to stop competition from emerging in broadband. Thanks. And NATOA is a charter member for which we're very grateful. And it's a particular pleasure to present in this room because there are some really extraordinary faces in this room. I don't know if you all know that some of the great pioneers of community broadband are in the room. The city of Wilson, North Carolina, the Greenlight Network is here. Will, where are you? Will Aycock, General Manager of Greenlight and currently a petitioner to the FCC asking to be freed from barriers against competition. Some of the counties that pioneered the model of building fiber to schools and libraries and public safety and government buildings are here, including Montgomery County, Maryland, Fairfax County, Virginia, and a number of others who I'm sure I will offend by not mentioning right now. And then, of course, City of Portland, Oregon. Same story, and one of the first municipal CLECs, in fact, in serving some of those anchor customers. And then, of course, Joe and Jeremy from Sandy, where some of the most interesting work in municipal fiber to the home is going on at the moment, as you heard in the last session, and a project of which I think this whole community is very proud. So this is a community that has been engaged in broadband planning for a very long time. Local governments were doing this 17, 18 years ago, long before Washington had heard about bandwidth or gigabits or fiber, and when a lot of the discussion in Washington was still about how we were going to enable the development of ISDN and similar technologies, and how deregulation was going to solve all problems. Local governments were leading the way. And what Lori's asked me to talk about today is some of the strategies from a best practice standpoint for those communities that have some, but not enormous amounts of fiber and broadband assets. How do you grow those? And from this, once you have them, and many of you will already have some, and even if you only have a little, you still have a bunch of options. But once you have them, how do you maximize them? How do you price them? And how do you make them available to the private sector, if that's the route you choose to take? I'm not going to speak to the marketing and sales of that. That's not my area of expertise, but I believe my friend Doug will do that afterwards. I'm really just going to talk about strategies for building, pricing, and how that fits into selling as opposed to the marketing strategy. And Lori's going to give me a sense if I'm going too long. I'm going to have to talk pretty fast. Okay. So, all right. I'm going to talk really quickly about how to get those assets in place, what you want in terms of assets. Most of our communities are not going to build fiber to the home networks. That's an enormous effort and an enormous amount of risk. It's an incredibly important type of effort, but it is for many, in most cases, frankly, I think for American communities, just a few steps too far. But to get their feet wet and to really make a difference in this market and to potentially change the market locally, there are a range of strategies for using existing government assets, building on them, and potentially making them available to private partners or using them yourselves to serve the public. What I'm focusing on here is more public ownership of those assets and then making them available to private partners because it's a lower risk effort and sometimes very attractive, I think, to elected officials. Then I'm going to talk a bit about how to maximize the value of those assets as you think about them, and that certainly plays into pricing. And then I'm going to talk about how to price the assets, or a range of different ways. And I'll give you a few very quick case studies. I'm going to have to go through all this really quick, but I have some papers and publications I can send you, so feel free to approach me afterwards if you're interested in seeing them. I'm just going to quickly summarize. When we talk about assets that are marketable and leasable and that move the needle in terms of the broadband environment in your community, I'm usually talking about three major things: conduit, fiber, and real estate. Real estate for purposes of hub sites, interconnection sites, meet-me points, and so on. Conduit as a mechanism for getting fiber out there, and then, of course, fiber itself. The fiber is the holy grail. The more fiber you have, the more potential users you have of that fiber, the more potential private entities you are able to enable to come into your community. Conduit is a very, very useful asset as well, but it is far more limited because if you have a conduit, chances are you will have a customer in that conduit. If you have 266 count fiber, you could potentially have 10 or 15 potential customers. And they may not be there today or tomorrow, but in the next few years, you may see that there are enough private entities out there interested in using your assets that is doable. So fiber, and I'll get into pricing in a few minutes, but just generally, fiber pricing is like real estate pricing, depends on where you are. And it depends not only regionally and locally on where you are, but sometimes what block you're on and what neighborhood you're in. Conduit is a little bit more consistent. Generally around the country, we see conduit leased for $5 to $7, sometimes $9 a foot. Now, think again what I said about the limitations of conduit. If you have a conduit, you can lease it maybe at $7 a foot. If you have 266 count fiber going through that conduit, you've got a whole lot of leasing options. So you also have a lot more revenue opportunity, and that revenue then potentially turns into a mechanism for building more fiber or more conduit. Interduct is up there because interduct is sometimes the solution to being conduit rich but fiber poor. Interduct is a way in which you can pull fiber through your conduit and essentially turn a conduit into multiple conduits by having multiple ducts in. The technical explanation is not going to be my strong suit, but I'll show you a picture in a minute. But essentially think of it as a way of subdividing your conduit. If you're building conduit, you want to build lots and lots of it. You want to put in banks of conduit. Alternatively, you want to put in just a few if you're filling it with fiber, and just do the math and figure out what makes more sense and what is cost effective. Another thing that might point you in certain directions in that regard would be, what is the appetite of your community point toward? In some communities, they want to stick with conduit because they feel it's just less risky. It doesn't look like they're leasing communications assets in the same way as with fiber. In other communities, leasing fiber is no problem politically, and in fact, in many communities, lighting up that fiber and leasing services is not a problem. But that all of those questions will point you in a certain direction. This is just a big overview. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. When I say think regionally about these assets, what I mean by that is that your conduit and your fiber are very much like roads. Your roads are only valuable, well, they're valuable locally, but they're way more valuable if they connect to roads in somebody else's community that's right next to you. All right, same sort of thing. If the roads come to an end at your county or city or town boundary, it is a much less valuable asset. The more you think regionally, the more you are able to build in a cooperative way. That doesn't mean you're necessarily building together, but it means you're potentially building to meet each other's infrastructure at the jurisdictional boundaries. And you're building in ways that your assets can be joined together. So you're building, for example, the same size conduit using the same spec, so you can interconnect. The more you do that, the more valuable your aggregate assets become, because you can see why a fiber link all the way from San Francisco to Los Angeles would be far more valuable than a fiber link across one of the counties between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I don't mean to call out California, it's true anywhere in the country. The more things your fiber or your conduit connects to, the more valuable each piece of it is. You've got greater aggregate value, but you've also got greater per unit value, and you would definitely see that in marketability and in pricing. And then price strategically, and I'll talk about this in the context of the case studies also, but the idea here is that you have an asset that, in our experience, is marketable. Marketable in different ways in different areas with different kinds of price attached. But you have an asset where you can have a primary goal of revenue maximization, which is not an unreasonable goal at all, but you can also have other kinds of strategies that are driven by your use of this asset. So for example, you can have a very deliberate strategy, as has been the case in North Carolina statewide over the past few years, of bringing down market price and creating a market where none exists, where there's currently only monopoly pricing. The MCNC network, a BTOP awardee, thank you NTIA, was very deliberately priced its fiber in a way that they would create a market because it would be affordable in ways that the monopoly product was not, and frankly goes to places the monopoly product is not. You can price your fiber in that way. You can price your fiber or conduit for economic development purposes. You can, for example, give economic development credits in return for commitments about certain kinds of investments in your community. If your fiber goes to a certain point and you want to encourage last mile build out from that point, the fiber to that point could be reduced in price in return for a private partner making a commitment to build last mile fiber. You can use this asset strategically through pricing to get to certain kinds of policy outcomes. If you understand first and foremost what you're trying to accomplish with it, what the vision is with it, then it'll point you in the direction of building certain kinds of assets and pricing them in a certain way and making them available to certain kinds of entities, because you're driven by the policy goals as opposed to just the how do we lease this out and bring in revenues? And that then becomes an incredibly powerful tool where your community's risk is still relatively limited, but you're able to use this asset to incent the private sector to do more of the kinds of things that you're hoping it will do. All right, that's big picture overview. I got 5 minutes. All right, I'm gonna flip through all of this. told you I was not the technical person. Sir, in the back? Ah, thank you. There we go. I'm going to ask Lori to do the slides for me. Can you go back one? Can you go back? Okay, next one. So, back two. Forward one. I'm feeling much better about my technical capabilities. Sorry, Lori.
Anything I can do to make you look good.
Okay, here's the central insight. Your assets, wherever they are, they may not have been built with an eye toward maximizing private sector use, but wherever they go, they are potentially valuable. If you have fiber or conduit that were built as part of a traffic camera program, for example, they are probably going into neighborhoods. If you build fiber to get to schools or fire stations, they are deep in the neighborhoods of your community. These assets are then in a place where they are potentially expandable from there. I'm gonna have to take my clicker back, I'm sorry.
It's okay, nothing personal.
And the idea is that once it's there, it's very usable. Am I supposed to point this way? Okay. Okay. So here's a vision for how some of these assets are usable, and I'll skip through all the slides after this that go into detail, but let me just sort of describe what it looks like. If you think about what a broadband network looks like from the standpoint of how an industry provider will design and build that network, very, very simply, you have the internet backbone, which is probably not something that we at the local level are going to have a lot of impact on, but then we'll have some kind of a major point of presence. That's something that might use some of your real estate or might exist already. And then on the other end, on the far right, you have the last mile infrastructure, the wireless or fiber that goes all the way to the home and business. Some fraction of American communities are going to build that. Some of them are in the room right now, but most likely, the great majority of our communities are going to think that is something we need the private sector to do. The potential role of localities, though, is to use existing and future assets to bridge that piece in the middle, what's sometimes referred to as the middle mile, which is to take its fiber and its real estate and make that bridge between the internet backbone, those big bundles of fiber that cross the country and go up and down our major highways, to bridge from there into our community. That's where your assets are potentially very, very valuable and where your risk is lowest. Okay, I'm going to speak without slides. There we go. All right. So there are a whole bunch of ways that you can add to existing assets. There are very low-cost, low-risk mechanisms for expanding the assets that you have in terms of putting in new conduit whenever the opportunity presents itself, putting in fiber, using dig once strategies. And I've written a bunch of stuff around best practices and some numbers and some engineering stuff, not written by me, but that I can provide you that talks about how to expand these assets locally and how to build as much as possible and to build them in ways that they become as desirable as possible, as monetizable, but also as valuable to private sector users. And so I'm going to flip through this because there is so much of it and I don't have time, but you should know that there are some relatively low-cost ways that you can really make a difference in this way at low risk. I'm not sure what's going on with the PowerPoint. Sir? Okay, there we go. All right. Maybe we can have a laptop up here for the next speaker, because what am I doing wrong? Okay, great, thank you. Can you go to the next one, please? And next, a few more, thanks. Until it says case study. Okay, that's good. I'll provide all of these slides for anyone who wants more of the detailed stuff. Let me just give you a few stories about communities who have very effectively used this kind of strategy of building out assets where they can and then leveraging them for other opportunities. This, I think, is a particularly interesting one, and I believe they're going to give a presentation sometime this week. These are communities that, with state, local, and federal money, built some backbone infrastructure, essentially built out that middle mile and a little bit of last mile, and used that infrastructure then, where they had partially built their community, leveraged it to get to their policy goals. What they wanted was fiber everywhere where there was demand, fiber all the way to the home, gigabit services, and competition over that fiber. And the existing infrastructure that they had, they turned into a leverage point to negotiate with a very viable private partner that in return for use of that infrastructure made binding, written, enforceable commitments that it would build where demand presented itself, it would wholesale service to enable open access, and it would offer gigabit services right away. And in this way, the community was able to use some relatively modest existing assets to further its policy goals of getting fiber everywhere possible, all the way to the home and business, on an open access competitive basis with gigabit services. Can I have the next slide, please? This is another really interesting project with the same sort of strategy. This is a community that identified key target economic development areas, in this case, old warehouses with very little modern infrastructure, but warehouses that were really desirable for new companies, particularly high-tech companies, graphics companies, companies that are very focused on Hollywood and need huge amounts of bandwidth. And what the city is about to do is to potentially build infrastructure that would connect many of these buildings, meeting the goal of the companies that are coming into the building, but potentially also attracting new companies, because the attractiveness of the really cool old warehouse space is now married to this stunning next century infrastructure that's so essential for those kinds of businesses. Again, relatively low cost, relatively low risk given the outcome, using infrastructure where it's available, such as existing conduit, expanding it to meet particular policy goals. Can I have the next slide? I'm out of time. Okay. Here's a community that's been doing this for 15 years, very successfully, a conduit strategy that actually led to Apple locating a silicon manufacturing lab there in the past year. And one final slide. Clackamas County, the home county of Sandy, Oregon, also a longtime NATOA member, has used pricing in order to stimulate certain kinds of development and construction in certain parts of the county, just based on the availability of that infrastructure at pricing that is simply not matchable otherwise, and frankly, where no other infrastructure exists. So I will stop there, but please feel free to approach me later and I'll send this to you.
Thank you, Joanne. So once you have the assets, you have the network built, I know a lot of you out there are in that circumstance, you're asking yourselves, what do we do with this? How can we market it? How can we build from there? And so we will turn this presentation over to Doug Adams, whom you heard just briefly as a moderator last time. He's the Vice President at Strategic Networks Group, and he'll talk to you about marketing.
Can you hear me if I use this? No? No? If I bend down? Okay. How about now? So my background is twofold. I have my own firm. It's called the Think Agency. It's been in operation since 2010. We help market technology, including for Strategic Networks Group. So today I'm going to combine a little bit of my marketing background, which goes back 20 plus years, mostly technology solutions with marketing, with S&G's research, which focuses on, they've done surveys and assessments, and they have wonderful tools that I'll show you some of them, but this isn't really a commercial. It's about the data that they've collected that really reveal how utilization impacts and where we're falling down as we build these networks. And let's see if I can actually do this. Okay. So in 2008, I started working for a nonprofit in Northeast Ohio that has a very large fiber network that I won't name, but if you know them, you can figure it out. And the CTO, his strategy was all about, okay, so we're going to build it, and everyone's going to come. We're going to build this network, and everyone's just going to jump on it, and we're going to have utopia. Not Utah utopia, but utopia. And I thought, this sort of goes against everything that I've ever been taught, have experienced with technology marketing. But okay, he says we're going to build it, and people are going to come. But in reality, the problem with So at this point, what do we have? We have a catch. So we just sit back and we relax and we say, we're all going to be rich. Our network's going to be sustainable because we built it. By God, everyone understands what broadband is. Because after all, broadband's a utility, right? Who believes that? Most of the room, I bet. The problem is, there's two kinds of broadband. There's broadband that I'm basically going to go to Google and get my email, but that's not the broadband that we've been really pushing and developing and building for the past several years. I mean, that's not what ARA was about. That's not what all these grants were about. It's not about people being able to search on Google faster. So in order to really get folks on these high-speed networks, we have to help them understand it. We have to take it from a utility. All we have to do is build it, and they will come, to a different mentality. Okay, backwards. So a utility is basically a basic need. Water, sewage. We've talked about electricity. It's like, this is my pet peeve. It's like, oh, broadband is the electrification. Well, maybe, but you didn't go when electricity came. We didn't say, okay, do I want this level of electricity or that level of electricity? You didn't have all these choices, and you didn't have all these different, price points for electricity. Technology, which is what our new networks are. They're a luxury. They're high definition television. They're a smartphone versus a flip phone. They're a DVR. There are all these technologies that really require us as consumers to cross this chasm. Has anybody ever seen this? Because this is a very basic marketing principle. It's by a gentleman named Jeffrey Moore, and he's got 2 books, Crossing the Chasm and Inside the Tornado. And really what this theory is that if you put out any technology, there are folks who are over here, innovators and early adopters, that will buy it based off of just the feature. It's a feature, it's shiny, it's new, I will be cool. It doesn't matter what it is. There will be 10 to 15% of people who buy something just because it's cool. But for a product to actually become sustainable and successful and reach mass appeal, you have to cross that chasm by taking the product from something that is just a feature, shiny, new, fast, to these are the benefits that you're going to have if you purchase this solution, this product, any new technology. Does that make sense? Okay. So, amongst the tens of thousands of businesses that SNG has done research with, they've been able to ascertain that not only are individuals innovators or laggards, innovator being, look at my new shiny phone versus laggards, anybody have a flip phone? Not only are individuals that way, but we actually have businesses, and we've scored these businesses based off of assessments, tens of thousands of businesses that have taken this assessment that are not coincidentally, you have a very small percentage that are either innovators or early adopters. That 14 plus 3, they're at the bottom. not coincidentally, many new networks are finding that they've got, amongst small businesses, a number that is about 15% of businesses who are actually getting onto the fiber network. That's pretty consistent with what we found. So along with this marketing theory of crossing the chasm, there's also the theory of the fusion of innovations. This is actually a theory in marketing, and we like to sound smart once in a while. Really, how do we push this? How do we push technology? There's a few ways that we can do this. We can explain the technology. We can create a communications plan to reach the audience and actually communicate benefits, not just features. Reduce the time that it takes to realize those benefits. Really foster that environment and use those influencers to actually tell that story of, hey, listen, my company jumped on this gigabit network, and these are the innovations that we're able to accomplish. Those types of stories can be very inspirational for your community. So, again, going back to SNG's research and some of the things that we found, if you just leave your network alone, you just build it, and you hope that they will come, you end up with modest uptake in year 1 of 10%. You're going to get to 18% in year 3. But what we have found through studies with different case studies is that if you actually just drive utilization, you actually explain that this is not just about fast, but these are the innovations, this is what you can do as a business, you can actually see much better uptake. So why do we care? Obviously, I'm going to skip through this real quick, but obviously we all know that broadband is good. Broadband helps our businesses. It helps us grow the GDP, grow the tax base, grow jobs. So here we are with basically in this world of, we're pretty terrible when it comes to marketing in this world because all we care about is speed. We've got millions and billions of dollars to have Usain Bolt run really faster than the other Usain Bolt. We are, it's just speed. And it makes sense to some of us. Makes sense to a certain sector. It either makes sense to the innovators because we want speed. We don't care what that means. We want it. It makes sense to large businesses because we're always pushing the envelope as larger businesses. We need collaboration. We always have that 10% or so people within our business that are always pushing that envelope. It makes sense to a lot of households as well because you've got some of those innovators in your house. You've got a 17-year-old who's on Netflix on one screen and playing Call of Duty on another with his friends from across the country. You've got all these different applications that are driving the need for speed, the need for greater bandwidth. But the problem is 90% of the businesses in the United States are small businesses, the small and medium size enterprises. And they don't understand why they need to go from network A, utility, to network B, platform for innovation. They don't get it. And we're not helping. Because all we're doing, if I can go back. Okay. All we're doing is we're talking about speed. That's all we're doing. This means nothing to, and this is from research that we have found over and over and over again. Small businesses do not understand why they need to go from 10 meg to a gig, let alone 100 or any other speed. You're right, Joanne. This isn't Joanne's fault. So I'm new to the conference, but I understand that many folks in this room are from municipalities and looking at the importance of broadband. This is the research that SNG has done, looking at the jobs that businesses are asked, according to what you're doing online, the applications that you're conducting online, how many jobs, what percentage of the jobs within your organization exist today where they wouldn't have existed 5, 10, 20 years ago if the internet wasn't there with its applications. So new jobs, it's responsible for 42, almost 43% of all new jobs since 2013, and we've surveyed 7 states throughout the, include everywhere from North Carolina to Illinois to Nebraska, a few more. And that small businesses are actually creating more internet jobs, because once you can get a small or medium-sized business, and when I say small or medium-sized, I'm talking about 1 to less than 100. When you get those folks actually utilizing the internet, that's when you're actually seeing growth and jobs and real meaning for your community. So one of the things that I want you to take away from this is don't think that availability or adoption is the same thing as utilization. It's a 3-step process. We all applaud Sandy. I applaud Sandy. There's a huge crowd here applauding Sandy. But they're at step 1. Until you need to take steps 2 and 3. You can't just do one thing. You can't just build it and hope that folks will come. Maybe not a popular opinion, but the reality is that when you increase utilization on that broadband network, whatever the speed it is, be it 10 meg, 100 meg, gig, if you as a community can increase your utilization by 10%, how much time do I have? You increase that utilization, you increase revenues amongst those businesses by 24%. Again, based off of tens of thousands of assessments that we ask businesses, what are you doing online and what is it meaning to your revenues and cost savings? You're decreasing costs by 7%. What does this mean for an individual business? Next slide, please. For an individual business, if they just adopt one new internet application, just one, they can see that for a small business, they can see that just one thing online can increase their business by 18%. Or it can drive cost savings as high as 5%. They just do one additional thing. Next slide, please. This is a slide that basically, and I'm not going to get too wonky because S&G can be very wonky with our different measures. But basically, there's a score that we do from 0 to 10 called the DEI score, where it's basically this is your utilization of the broadband according to the questions that you answer. For those on the right side, the 9s and the 10s, not surprisingly, we see that just by utilizing the internet in many, many, many ways, that almost half of their revenues are as a result of being online. And this could be anything. I like to, because a lot of times you hear, oh, the internet's not for me, it's not in my industry, it doesn't apply to me. Manufacturers may say that. There's a movie theater down the street from where I live in outside of Boulder, Colorado, and maybe you have one of these as well. It's an AMC theater. They started selling tickets online, where you could buy tickets online. This is a business that depends on feet and people walking in. And I don't mean like the Fandango way. You can go online and pick your seat. That means you know where you're sitting, and you can show up either when the trailers start or 20 minutes in, and you're not going to be in the front row. What did that mean to their business? A 200% increase in folks coming to that theater. Next slide, please. So a lot of times people say, oh my God, I couldn't possibly do this. I can't possibly utilize the internet because I don't have a gigabit or we only have 10 meg here. It's not about speed. Availability of the internet is not the biggest barrier right now. It's about not having a knowledge of what to do online, being afraid of, as Jerome talked earlier, being afraid of security concerns, privacy concerns. It's really an educational matter with small businesses. Next slide, please. Let's skip this slide. Next slide, please. So basically, there are many, many ways to drive understanding. You could have case studies for utilization and what it's meant for different industries. You can have, you can advertise in a different way, not just about speed, but about all the different things that you can be more effective. Marketing speed is a lazy man's way to market a new network. One of the ways that SNG works on this is they do a one-to-one solution where within a region, you will send an assessment out to the businesses, and they'll fill out the assessment, and then they'll get a scorecard back. Next slide, please. So this scorecard is for any industry. This industry, this happens to be in the manufacturing with 20 to 49 employees. Scorecard's hard to see. These slides will be made available. But basically, if you could see this, you would see that 80% of their competitors are doing more online than they are. They've got a score of 4.6. That puts them on the lower end of the scale. But what's really nice, and I don't know if this, is there a pointer here? I don't know. If you could see on the bottom left, S&G provides actual applications, selling goods online here, advertising and promotion, customer service and support for this particular business, and on average, businesses within manufacturing and processing, organization size of 20 to 49 employees, on average, just by tackling those three applications, there's a net bottom line impact of $1,185,000. So that's real utilization and real business growth. We're not making this up. This is all self-reported, averaged out from their peers across the country. Does that make sense where we're getting this data? Next slide, please. Wrap up? Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Let's skip through these two slides, and I'm going to wrap up. Last slide here. So one of the things that we did through North Georgia, which was one of the original BTOP recipients, was we figured out that for every 100 businesses trained, shown the way, I guess, through a scorecard and other means, trained on how to use the internet. Within all industries, if you could just, on average, within industries, 17.5 for manufacturing, but the average was 7.2 million in bottom line impact for 100 businesses trained.
Thank you, Doug. That was fascinating. So now we'll sort of turn the page slightly and talk about some of the things that you can do to make your network more marketable, some of the applications and services that you can put on your network. And Hunter George, who is the communications director for Pierce County, Washington, will talk about this fantastic mobile app project as sort of a case study and what some of the things that you can do in your communities.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so I'm giving up on the remote. All right, I'm just gonna say next slide. I have learned my lesson. All right, we're gonna start. Actually, I'm gonna ask y'all to do me a favor. You're gonna help me boost my numbers today. Everybody, pull out your phone, please. I know all of you have at least one, and a lot of you have two. If you'd go to your app stores, please, either the Apple App Store or Google Play, and do a search for PCTV. I have Apple devices, so I know when I checked this morning, if you search for PCTV, you should get the Pierce County TV app. I'm hoping if you search Google Play for PCTV, you should get the same result. So I'm going to talk about this one, and you're going to help me boost my numbers today, so I appreciate that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the bottom line, the solution for us was we hired interns from the local college. So I'm going to drop the mic and walk off the stage now. seriously, so we're fortunate in Tacoma, Washington. We have a branch campus of the University of Washington. So it's not the mothership. They've got 40,000 students up in Seattle. And Seattle's got Amazon and Microsoft and all those folks, and they don't even look down, they don't look south at us. So we got real lucky and worked real hard and got a branch campus in downtown Tacoma. They converted a bunch of warehouses. There's only 4,000 students. We're not talking a gigantic college, so I think this kind of thing can work in a lot of communities if they've got the right program there. In this case, the University of Washington Tacoma branch has an Institute of Technology. They're essentially teaching what we all used to call computer science. So they're teaching folks how to program. And our IT director sits on their advisory board, and they asked a few years ago, how can we get our students out and how can we get them to get some real world experience while they're learning at the UW? And our IT director raised her hand and said, well, I'll start hiring some. So we created a mobile app, we created a mobile app internship. The way it works for us, and again, you can tailor it to your needs, we hire there's two students every 6 months. They work in a 6-month stint, and then when they're gone, 2 more come in. Sometimes there's one. There's almost always at least one in there, but generally we go for 2 at a time. We started with the UW's program, and we've since expanded it, and we'll take students from anywhere now. But it started out working with this one local college. It's managed by one of our GIS programmers, a guy named Jared Erickson. He's a great guy, and if you're interested in this kind of thing, then I'll connect you with him. And he can he can give you more detail about how it works. Bottom line is it gives them jobs, gives them real world experience, and it gives us mobile apps. It gives us the ability to take some of our programming and push it out in a different platform in a different way. It helps us market. It helps us market ourselves better because we're putting our programming and stuff we're putting it in your pocket. We're making it easier. And then I'm going to talk about this in a second. The IT started this program a few years ago. I kind of inserted my department. I'm the communications director for the county, and so I inserted myself in it about a year ago. And we've built. My department has worked with them to build 2 apps. You're going to see the difference between when IT people build an app and when they get the communications department involved. It gets a lot prettier. No offense to the IT people in the room. You're smarter than I am. But we'll make it look good, and we helped them with the user interface. We really helped them make it so that it does what they want it to do. These are a bunch of our former interns. The guy on the right built the farm app. He looks like the Unabomber's nephew, and he's the nicest kid. And he built this great app that connects consumers with local farms. It's really cool. Next slide, please. Okay, so just what we've done. We've done 4 external apps. Puget Sound Fresh is that farm app that I was telling you about, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. My Vote is our election app. A lot of jurisdictions I know have built apps like that. First to See, I wasn't involved with that one, so I couldn't answer more than 2 or 3 questions about it. But bottom line is, it's an emergency management tool. It enables it. If there was an earthquake here right now, we've all seen this, right, in our communities. Twitter explodes, right? It's the breaking news platform for the universe. And what First to See does is it maps it. And so if people are writing, hey, there's a tree down on this street, and there's a tree down on this street, and there's a tree down on this street, First to See will grab all that and map it for us and kind of put it in buckets, and it helps us actually collate all this, that when you're drinking through the fire hose of Twitter during an emergency, First to See helps you organize all that. And then Pierce County TV, which I'm going to talk about mostly. As of Friday, we had 6,488 downloads, so I'm hoping that I got at least 12 today. I like those round numbers. And then internal apps. We've also built, there are a number of apps we're building that you'll never see. They're for our employees. They're making our employees in the field, making them more efficient. The damage assessment one, so emergency management, again, in an emergency, we can send folks out and used to be they filled out paperwork and that kind of stuff. Now they can if they're taking pictures and they're writing down data, and then they just push a button and it goes back to the network back at our emergency operations center. It's made them much more efficient. Road ops, same thing. We misspelled catalog. I'm embarrassed. I'm a writer. We shouldn't have done that. And then field photo, our facilities department, with all the construction projects we do around our county facilities, the renovations and those kinds of things. It was a quick and easy little app that allows them to take and organize a lot of photos of their projects so that they can share those with their clients, with the departments that are having things renovated. And then in the works, the next two that we're always working on updating the ones that we have. So for example, in the next day or two, the PCTV app we're gonna push out an iPad, a version optimized for tablets. So we're always working on those. And then two new ones that are in the works are a Parks app, and then a commute trip reduction app. The state of Washington requires us to have a commute trip reduction program. All employers have to have it. We want to make an easy way for our employees to track bus trips and bike trips and that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. This one shows you the big one on the left there, Road Ops. IT built that one. It's very basic. Does a great job. The employees love it. The one on the right is the Farm app, where I got my graphic designer involved and I got involved and we helped. We isolated the material that we knew people wanted. We studied the data. We looked at all the web analytics, and so we had a good idea of what to feature on the homepage and push a button and get all the nearest farms that are closest to you. Next slide, please. So this is the Farm app. This one, and I wanted to chat about this one for a second. Again, this is another partnership. My boss, I work for the county executive and the county council in our county, and they said we want to. We're such an urban. We're becoming. We used to be a farm county, and now we're a suburb of Seattle. Very urbanized. We've lost a lot of farms. So we want to preserve what we have left, and there's a new generation of farmers coming online, and they're organic, and they're doing a lot of new things, and they're doing CSAs. They're delivering their products to offices and homes. So the bosses said we want to save farms. We want to do something to help them promote themselves. I thought of, well, why don't we try building an app that will connect them with the customers? There are a lot of customers in those cities, and those farms are just outside those cities, and you can drive just a few minutes down the road and buy all this fresh stuff. So sure, I've got the people who could build that, right? We've got that IT department. We've got the interns from the University of Washington. Where are you going to get your data? In this case, there's an outfit in Seattle called the Cascade Harvest Coalition, and they produce a printed farm guide. It's 3.5 people and 2 dogs in a 2-room office in a neighborhood in Seattle, and they produce this 56-page printed guide, and it's great, but you can't carry it around in your pocket. And so I called them up and said, look, I've got this cool intern program here, and I'll build you guys an app, and we'll market it as your product. In exchange, I need you to plug in your data. If we can use your data, we'll build the app. They think we're a gift from heaven. And we're the government. That doesn't happen very often. So it's pretty cool. So again, with their data, they've got 200 plus farms, 100 plus farmers markets. All those you can search by product, and this is one page on it. This is if you click on farms, then it gives you a map and it gives you the farms that are closest to you. So when I was in my office in downtown Tacoma, the nearest farms, there are 5 of them that are 5 miles away, and I can get fresh berries and all that kind of stuff. It's a really cool program. We're super proud of it. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our TV app, which is the business that most of us in here are doing. And before I talk about it, I'm going to ask Dave Hinman to stand up and wave to you for a second. He's the general manager of Pierce County TV. This was his idea. He should probably be up here. He did a great job. Dave came from the PBS system. He worked for like 5 of their channels in his career. He's been a general manager of 2 of them. And so I stole him away from the local PBS station a year ago. And one of the first things he said to me is, well, I want to build a mobile app. I think that'll help us with our marketing, help us with our promotion. And again, we want to be where people are. So he took the lead on this, and we were primarily inspired. We always go out and look and see what are other folks doing, right? And so in our case, we looked at the PBS app and we looked at BYU TV, which are both fairly similar, as you can see. They offer a featured video on their homepage, and then as you drill in, you get the rest of their content. You can share the content, you can create a playlist, that kind of stuff. So you're going to see a lot of this in the app that we built. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll get into ours. This is the Pierce County TV homepage on the app. Again, it features videos, and it's a slideshow, so it shows, I think right now they're released on that picture, there were 8 of them. And if you just held it open, it'll slide by and offer you those videos. We pull video from 2 sources, which was a technical challenge. All of our meetings, we use Inventus to archive that, and then we take we do a lot of news programming, and we take every news story and we put it on our YouTube channel, and so we needed the app to pull from both of those places. If you want to watch a meeting, it's over here. If you want to watch a story, it's over here. So it was a technical challenge, and we're meeting it. Next slide. So now as you drill in, you get a choice of meetings or shows. You can see on the top there's 2 tabs. One says meeting, one says shows. This is the meetings page. We're a little different than most of you in that we serve 7 jurisdictions. So the county's the biggest, but we have 6 cities. And everybody gets equal treatment on this channel. And so we've made it easy for folks in all these various jurisdictions to find the material they're looking for. Next slide. So if you click on any one of those, in this case I picked the county council, all the jurisdictions are the same. It gives you the most recent meeting. If you touch that picture, that launches that particular one. In this case, this is our county council. They have a number of committees, and we televise those meetings, and so those are listed below it. Next slide. From meetings, if you went over to shows, we feature kind of 4 categories here. We've got our weekly news program. We have Rainier Country, which is our news magazine that we do 3 times a year. Pierce County Talks is our monthly talk show, and then just lots of special presentations. And again, we make it easy for folks to find that. Next slide. Oh, and actually, go back 1. So again, we've in our new version that's going to go live this week. If you turn the iPad, it'll fill the screen, but it's still pretty. That wasn't pretty, and so we have a new version coming out this week where we've optimized it better for tablets. So, next slide. We have a Watch Live button that's available on every page, and again, if you turn that screen right now, it fills the screen. Next slide. You can create a playlist. In my case, we have the U.S. Open coming next year to our county. It's coming and the county owns the golf course. So we're up to our eyeballs on planning for the U.S. Open, and we're doing a ton of videos about it. And so I've got on my personal playlist, I'm storing a lot of those U.S. Open video stories that we're doing because I want easy access to those. So we're excited about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so just quickly, particularly for the IT people here in the room, I don't know what some of these things do, but I've got a great partnership with Jared, who does. But we wanted you to know everything we build it for those 2 platforms. We are not proficient in the Microsoft system, so we're not building them for Windows phones yet. That's someday if we get that proficiency in the IT department, then we will. We're using PhoneGap and these other programs. This is where, again, I wanted to show you graphic design. That's where we come in, and we always joke that our department, we're like that old BASF ad. We don't make the products, we just make them better. And so we're excited about that. In terms of timing, I should say we pay our interns $15 an hour. And again, we have 2 at a time. You could do 1, and I mean we can work on 2 projects simultaneously with the 2 interns. And in fact, they probably, from talking to Jared, they really work on more than 2 things. They might be building that Parks app, but for a day or 2, they'll peel off and either fix a bug or something will come up that we'll want to update. They're always putting out new updated operating systems, and of course those jack us up a little bit for a few days, and so we have to go through and update everything to work cleanly with those. And what Jared's talked to me about is, there's their school schedule, their talent level. Some of them come in and are more advanced than others. When they start, we give them about 2 to 3 weeks of training. We go through these programs with them and really make sure they're ready to actually start working on one of these things, because again, it's it's not a toy, this is the real thing, and at the end of the day, we need this thing to work for our citizens. So there's a lot of hands-on with them, with this one guy, Jared, who does a great job with that. Next slide, please. The two biggest challenges, one, Android is just a gigantic, it was a colossal challenge. You all probably know that, right? I mean, Apple's such a closed environment that it's easy to write an app for them and it works. We ended up launching we launched the Apple version in February. The Android version was 2 or 3 months later because we just couldn't get the video. We were pulling video from 2 sources and we just could not, it took us a few months to get that to work. The Android platform is just a really challenging one because there's so many different, we would test it and it would work fine on this device and it would not work on that device, and that's the nature of working with Android. And again, pulling from 2 sources was hard. Next slide. So our next steps, again, we're optimizing for tablets. We want to do individual story search. We want to make the app a little more robust and make it easy to drill in and find. We're adding so much video content every week that we want to make sure that people can find stuff very easily. So those are the main things we're working on there, and I'm almost done. Okay, so marketing this. Next slide. Again, this is where my department excels at this, and so we created a media kit, and we put that online. Again, we have all those partners. We have the 7 member jurisdictions, and so I only represent one of them. So we wanted to make sure that the 6 others all had access to these materials. We gave them graphics and things they could put it in your utility bill if you want, or put it in your city newsletter, put it on your website. We gave them lots of tools they could use to help us share this material. Next slide. These are some of the things we did. Again, we created the flyers. Dave had the idea. He's a member of the Chamber of Commerce. He paid to have an insert put in the calendar that told people about the app. The usual places, advertising on our channel, on our social media channels. I like to point that out when my council is going to do something particularly newsworthy one day. I'll tweet, their 3 o'clock council meeting, they're going to talk about, marijuana legislation or something, and check it out on our app. Watch live on your phone. So we look for those opportunities. Next slide. There's Jared, not his picture, but his email, and you're welcome to reach out to him, or I can make an introduction for you. Just a really nice guy, and he loves this program. This is the picture of our. This is what the internal app store looks like for Pierce County. So again, for employees, when I take my county device, I have a little button, a bug on there that says approved apps, and we go to that, and it gives me all these, and these are the internal apps. So that's what our internal store looks like. And last slide. And that's it. And again, my contact information there. David from PCTV, his is on there as well, and we're happy to talk about it. I want to say there are a number of others who are doing this as well. See, I'm a fan of the Seattle Channels app. They've done a great job with theirs, and I know there's some others in the industry as well. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hunter. Just to put this in perspective, couple of quick stats on mobile apps. So in the commercial sector, it costs anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 to develop an app, depending on the features and the size and the type. And I know Hunter did a great job in talking about the difference between Apple and Android. And when you develop an app, you really have to think about all of those things, including security. And so hopefully you're seeing how all of these things fit together, all of the panelists from the first panel and this panel. So with that, we'll pause for a moment and we'll take some questions for the audience. We have about 5-7 minutes or so for questions. And if not, then I will start it off by saying, Joanne. I know one of the things that we talk about at NATOA with our local communities, of course, is that we have an unbelievable benefit with all of our assets that we have at our disposal. Fiber, conduit, rights of way, all of those things that as local governments we can use. So what would be some advice that you could give communities in how best to go about and use those assets?
So start by inventorying what you have because chances are you have things that you don't know you have. You have assets you haven't thought about in a long time, or that other departments of your government have, and they don't know how marketable and monetizable some of those assets might be, and how they move the needle in terms of broadband. So like a city DOT could have fiber, they could have conduit, your transit authority could have the same. You, of course, have all of that real estate, you have rooftops. There are assets that cities are not even aware of that can really make an impact. And when I say make an impact, I mean not only in terms of making them available to private providers, which is a great model for those communities who want to do that, but for those communities who are thinking about their own options in terms of broadband and opening doors in broadband. The more assets you have, the more organized, planned, documented, very important, document them, otherwise they don't exist. If they're just in somebody's head or on a piece of paper in someone's office, they really almost are not there. But documented and planned and coordinated and interoperable, you can build toward some kind of a tipping point where you have something usable. That was that story about Mesa, Arizona I was talking about. They started late 90s planning to build conduit in the downtown so as to reduce the wear and tear on the right-of-way with lots and lots of different CLECs coming in and building. They put in their own conduit over time, slowly but surely, and added where the prospect approached, where the opportunity was right, and have added some fiber since then, have just used every opportunity they could, and have turned that into not only an incredibly valuable asset with significant revenue attached, but the thing that made the difference between attracting Apple and not attracting Apple.
Absolutely. And to Joanne's point about documenting, just a little side note for those of us, we all know the story of the community that says, we have this fantastic fiber network, but we have no idea where it is or where it goes to. And so, once you have taken inventory of your assets, make sure you document it in a central location so that changeover in administration doesn't create a problem that you have to redo again and again.
A quick thought on that. In many communities, there is a guy, it's almost always a guy in Public Works, who has a folder full of paper that tells you where all your conduit and all your fiber is. And sometimes he doesn't even have it in paper, it's just in his head. He's the most valuable person in your community from the standpoint of broadband in many ways. He is also incredibly vulnerable because something could happen to him. And if something happens to him and all of that documentation and all that knowledge has not been put into some kind of really reliable digital documentation system that is usable by your broader community, you've lost that huge investment.
And that actually did happen to a community that I'm familiar with, where there was one map, and the map was given to someone who unfortunately died in a tragic accident. So those things do happen. But anyway, Doug, are there any takeaways that you can give in terms of marketing these assets and just continuing with your presentation in terms of what these folks can do to maximize their benefit?
Sure. I guess if you remember one thing, it's like we all surround ourselves with like-minded people, politically, socially, everything. And we all come to these conferences, and everyone realizes that broadband is good, and we're building a platform for innovation, and we're doing an awesome job. So, yay for all of us. But at the end of the day, 90% of our businesses don't know what the hell we're doing, because they're small and medium-sized businesses, and they don't know they're like, I can Google, I can get my email, I may have a basic website, and a lot of small businesses don't even have that. So just take, to bridge that, to help folks cross that chasm, to really sort of remember that this is not, yes, we all believe that broadband should be a utility, but for meaningful use of broadband, it's a technology decision that you have to give them the benefits for why they would do so, as opposed to it's fast. Does that answer your question?
Great, thank you. And Hunter, for you, what would the takeaways be for a community looking to do what you've done in terms of establishing a pilot program, developing apps cost effectively?
I would say certainly one of the lessons we learned, I showed you apps that we've built. What I didn't show you was the list of apps that haven't launched. And again, as we built this program, there are at least 3, probably 4, might even be 5, probably 4 apps that we started and built and tabled. And for various reasons, either technical or in several cases, the IT department actually got out ahead of the programs, and they thought, hey, it'd be great, let's build this app, and they didn't talk to the program folks and didn't build it the way the program folks would have. They did that with Parks. They actually built a Parks app, and it just doesn't look good. It doesn't have good user interface. We don't think it's something that people would use, and so we're going to sort of blow it up and start over again. So part of that is don't be afraid to fail. I mean, on the other hand, we've built at least 7 really, very good apps that are making employees more efficient. And so they don't all have to be external either. We're pretty excited about those internal apps.
So can I ask you a quick
Yeah.
question? So how do you test the usability of the apps? I mean, how do you do that? Do you just like do the Microsoft way and throw it out there and let everybody complain and then change it? Or do you do it some other way?
We have been, that's a great question. We've been expanding, again, it's generally internal. What I wish we could do, like when we were building that farm app, and I couldn't give it to those ladies who run the farm program in Seattle, they're not behind our firewall, and so we had no ability to show that to them. So we went up there several times, and we took a few road trips, go up there, and would let them see it and play with it a little bit and give us some feedback. And I sent them a lot of screenshots and stuff so they could see what we were building. But for the most part, and again, what we did is we expanded it beyond IT, and so I have the communications department now as we're in the testing group, so when they launch something, we take a look at it, and we have a different perspective than our really, really smart friends in IT.
Thank you all. I know we are out of time, I think, but 2 quick notes is that I'm going to give a plug for the broadband adoption community affinity dinner this evening. My co-host, Brian Roberts, is also co-chair of the broadband committee and executive board member of NATOA. We'll be meeting at 7:15 at the Downtown or Woodfire Grill. If you want to come. I'd love to have you, and I know Joanne and Doug and hopefully Hunter will be able to join us as well there, so you can continue the conversations. And we have a great lunchtime panel, so on adoption, which I know is the next step we're looking at. But please give us a round of applause for these great panelists. It's great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a fun program to brag about.